Hello and welcome to this week's edition, the 131st episode of Old Romans Unscripted. I'm Archbishop Jerome, and with me is Brother Stanislaus. How are you?
I'm doing well, Excellency. How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's been a busy week, but not too bad. And of course, this week, I should thank you all for your well wishes and prayers. I celebrated the 10th anniversary of my episcopal consecration on Thursday, and I beg your prayers for however longer God wants me to serve for. Of course, this week too was the passing and the requiem obsequies of Bishop Daniel Dolan. May he rest in peace. And I will post the videos of the vigil and the funeral mass for Bishop Dolan on the oldroman.com. So if you missed that, do look out for that. Very beautiful mass, it must be said, celebrated with great dignity and solemnity, and an open coffin, so the faithful were able to view and see Bishop Dolan in repose, and it was a very moving ceremony and a moving eulogy, and gave me a lot to think about, because his funeral occurred on Thursday, which was, of course, my consecration anniversary. So gave you much to think about on Thursday, and that's why today's edition I've entitled Tradition versus Traditionalism. Now, this is something that we touched upon last week in our discussion about sheep and wolves, and about the true shepherds at the present time, who are trying to speak with the one voice of the one good shepherd. So we're going to continue with a discussion along those lines, because, as we said last week, and as we're always saying, but I don't think we can overstate this enough, that there is a important difference between true tradition and traditionalism. One perpetuates the Catholic faith, the other may. And as we discussed last week, it's not always certain, but I want to sort of draw out some more this week in our discussion about that, about how to recognize and appreciate and know the difference. So first of all, some greetings, some lovely greetings. Deacon Philip greeting us from Macedonia and Georgia. Anne, faithful Anne, bless you, Anne, from Ireland. Barbara, who is just over the valley from me here in the UK. Austin, welcome, Austin. And Peggy, excellent, lovely to see you. And welcome to you too, Patrick. And thank you very much. And of course, please do pray for me. So, what do I mean essentially? What is this difference between tradition and traditionalism? And really, to sort of cut things down to the chase, and then we can expand. But to cut things down to the chase, essentially, tradition is no, actually, it's probably easier to say it the other way around. Traditionalism. What the difference between traditionalism and tradition is this: that traditionalists, by which I mean those who adhere to traditionalism, adhere in various different ways. So there's the ascetical, the spiritual, the theological, the devotional, and by which I mean that a traditionalist, an adherent of traditionalism, may manifest traditionalism in any one of those ways. So they may, for example, profess an appreciation aesthetically for traditional liturgy. They may prefer the traditional Latin Mass. They may attend the traditional Latin Mass. They may prefer traditional devotions like the Rosary. They may profess traditional concepts in theology and philosophy, and probably with a political bent for those who are traditionalists. But at the same time, they are happy with various compromises. So they are happy and equate the Novus Ordo Missae as being having the same value and standing and equivalency as the traditional Latin Mass. Likewise, though they might say they have a preference for the traditional administration of sacraments, they'll be just as happy to acknowledge the sacraments administered according to the new rites. Though they may profess a preference for more traditional theology, they are happy to embrace everything that Vatican II has taught and all that has been taught since Vatican II. In other words, traditionalists who adhere to traditionalism are happy to essentially compromise the faith and the praxis of the faith based upon their subjective appreciation of it. Whereas those who are adherents of tradition will adhere to tradition, to traditional liturgy, to traditional devotionals, to traditional theology as a matter of course and as a first choice. In other words, there is no other choice. There is no compromise. There is no appreciation for modernisms of any kind. One who adheres to true Catholic tradition would not would probably attend a Novus Ordo Missae under duress. They certainly would have problems with Vatican II, and certainly the liturgy and theology developed since Vatican II. That essentially is the difference. Now, this is probably a good point to bring on Bishop Caeli, who I see is waiting in the wings, and then we can get into our discussion. Hello, Bishop Caeli.
Yes, good to be here. Good to be here.
It's good to see you.
Hello, Excellency.
Very well. How's your week been?
Busy, but not overly burdensome. So, been good.
Good. Excellent. Okay, so I know you were listening in the wings, so to speak. So why is it then important to know and appreciate what the difference between tradition and traditionalism is? And I would say it's because if for the survival and the continuance and the perpetuation of the Catholic and Apostolic faith, tradition is the only sure means. The other route, traditionalism, full of compromises, full of equivocations, etc., has resulted in the present crisis in the Church today. That is to say, that if more traditionalists who adhere to traditionalism had been actual traditional Catholics and, say, joined Archbishop Lefebvre in his stance, or indeed joined us in our stance, and other traditional Catholics, perhaps things might have been slowed down, or things would be different. But instead, we're facing a situation where the church in Germany is basically an open schism, is promoting heresy and apostasy. Likewise, a vast majority of the bishops globally adhere to Vatican II liturgy and theology, and all that entails, meaning that it is, as Brother Stanislaus highlighted last week, becoming more and more difficult for a traditional Catholic to find unquestionable sacraments and teaching. And the real issue, I think, is the teaching. I mean, don't get me wrong, the sacraments are very important, but real catechesis, real teaching. So many Catholics aren't able to recognize the difference between tradition and Catholic teaching and traditionalist Catholic teaching. Now, I don't know if Bishop Kelly or Brother Stanislaus would like to expand on that a bit further, read the difference between traditional teaching and traditionalist teaching.
I mean, I would say, first of all, regarding the German bishops, you only have to look up the YouTube video of the German bishops meeting Pope Benedict, and the vast majority of them refusing to shake his hand, never mind kiss the papal ring. I mean, it's quite shocking and embarrassing. And normally I'm kind of long-winded, but so it'll surprise our viewers when I say my comments on this is that there are people who live the tradition, and then there are LARPers.
I guess it's my cue because
yeah. I've shocked you all with my brevity.
yeah. Well, I'm not sure where to begin because I want to be honest with the both of you and with our viewers. I think the both of you already know. Our viewers may be some who have watched the show previously may be aware that I tend to sometimes come from a different or maybe far out perspective sometimes. And I'm going to do it again because it's not that it's far out. It's that I'm just commenting from things that are happening here in Detroit. It's something I remembered this week. I don't know because you're both, and I don't mean this in a bad way. You're both European, so I don't know what your understanding is, if it's the same as mine in regards to American politics and things like that. But there's a saying here regards all politics is local, and a successful politician, even one that becomes a national politician, is a successful local politician always and first. And I was thinking about that this week, and I thought about us and our mission, and particularly me, and that it's always got to be local. Yes, that it's important that our reach is global because we have a global reach through the internet, like anybody could. And it can be frustrating because even beginning the show and listening to Archbishop Jerome's opening, and I was thinking, why aren't more people watching? Why aren't there more people hearing this? Because they need to hear this. More traditionalists, more people who call themselves followers of the church's sacred tradition, but they're not. And it's recurred to me over the past few weeks that what we have is very much like what used to be known as the independent cable shows in the beginning of cable news, and you could do it from your living room, from your home, and people would. and they'd have 1 or 2 viewers, 3 viewers, but that's how it began. That's how the messages came across, and you can go back and you can find some of those who began very small, that their shows like EWTN, not that we even want to go there, but just as an example, that's how they began. And so with us, being proponents, not just proponents, but living sacred tradition, because it's not a matter of, I would say, and I'm going to defer to both excellencies, and I hope everyone hearing my comments recognizes that. But that in my opinion, that it's not a matter of argument for us, because we live it, we sacrifice it. All 3 of us that you see on your screen are living and sacrificing traditionalism and being a traditionalist. We pay for it and continue to pay for it. Now, it's not that men who maybe are clerics as well, who have not done it, can't appreciate that, but I kind of think that's the truth. For instance, like the SSPX. The SSPX has what they have because of they went to court. And that's why they have so many buildings and churches and all of that. They fought for it. Not that we couldn't have done the same thing, or that we should. My point is that if you want to know what traditionalism is, what a traditionalist is, then you have to find the person living it, not teaching it, not saying it, but living it. That means that person more than likely is going to be someone who is suffering from the results of making that decision. Because tradition, to follow that which the church is, not what the church was, because it's not vintage, it's not nostalgia, it's what the church is. And so even, I think, it's not even to restore, because there's no rest. If we think of restoration in the sense of, I think sometimes some of my friends on Facebook, they think that, yeah, that's what we're fighting for. That's never going to happen. There's never going to be a restoration of what was ecclesiologically in the church, because that was given up, and we can talk about all those reasons. But if we're talking about traditionalism, understanding it, it's not a matter of teaching, it's a matter of living. And so people who say that they're traditionalists or that they're traditionalism, but yet go to Novus Ordo parishes and then will pepper traditionalism or traditionalist type communities because they are open to that, it doesn't make any sense to me. I even thought of it in this way, and I'm going to use Bishop Kelly's time, if he doesn't mind. I thought of, there's an old Christmas animation, and they have this Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And there's the Island of Misfit Toys. And it's where there are all these toys that were something wrong with them or whatever, and they're waiting for Santa to come by one day to pick them up. And I thought of that. I said, I wonder if it's the island of misfit Catholics, that we're all kind of there. You have the Sedes and the different traditionalist communities. And the more I thought and I prayed about it, and I thought, no, because the Sedes would kick us all off. They would have nothing to do with us because they require that you reject publicly that which we agree with. But my problem with that is, and I'm getting into how I would teach, is that what do I tell that person from the Novus Ordo Church who's simply growing and searching and listening and opening their heart, and they see and they recognize that something's wrong? Like here in Detroit, I was talking about local, the Archbishop here, Archbishop Vigneron, finally just released the decree on Traditionis Custodes. And I think, I'm not sure, because I don't have an actual copy of it because it went out to only the priests of the Archdiocese. But I know of it and what's in there. That it's probably the most restrictive in this country, if not the world. And I was wondering, why would he do that? Here's a man that is close to retirement. But then as I started to think about it and reflect on it and pray about it, I thought, everybody, I've defended him. I like him. I think he's a nice man. Um, if he's anything, he's a man of ambition. He's a man that has always looked up on the ladder in his career as a priest. He's always looked for the next step. And all of a sudden, it kind of changed for him because Detroit used to be a red hat city until Francis. And I thought, I wonder if he's finagling his way to a red hat before a retirement, because he's certainly doing that through the Conference of Bishops here in this country. He wants to be president. He thought he was going to be president, and I forget what happened, and he ended up being secretary. But the way it works is you're secretary, then you're vice president, and then you're president, and then you retire. Go look at the line. It's almost always happened that way. And so I realized that's what he wants. It's about him. And so he has allowed this, because don't get me wrong, this is a result of the people who are at that chancery. And so in this archdiocese now, beginning on July 1st, there's one parish, that is going to be allowed to offer the 1962 Missal of the traditional Mass. One. And then any other priest who wishes to offer the sacrifice of the Holy Mass has to petition the chancery every year. And so does any parish. Now, what do you think is going to happen when they petition? When those churches that say, we have people that want to understand tradition, traditionalism, they want to understand our church, of who we are, who we've been, even at that point, even if it's just nostalgia, they want to know who we are. They want to know their roots. And this is a quote that he used from Traditionis Custodes, which we warned about on this show when Traditionis Custodes was released. That same quote that Archbishop Vigneron used it, that he is going along with what Pope Francis has said. There's one expression of the Roman Rite, one. And we must all be looking towards that. So even if you're attached to the traditional rite, he's going to give you this time, but you've got to be looking towards that. So it's going to be gone from this archdiocese, except for, thank God, for us.
Yeah, I think it's what you've highlighted there, brother, is that it's a toxic environment, and we look to eternal Rome, and but it has let us down in past 150 years, I suppose. But it's not to say it's lost yet. But one of the things that I would highlight in what you said is that, and you have to be very careful about this, and you have to express this to other people. It's that it's not nostalgia; it's a lived experience. When I get up in the morning, the first thing out of my lips is a morning offering. I live my life as a Catholic. I live my life as a Catholic priest and bishop, and I say my offices, I say my daily mass, and I do my penances, and I enjoy my feasts, and the Catholic life is a lived experience, and like we always used to do. I mean, it was a Catholic life is a joyous life. We're not. I don't mean to offend anyone who's listening, but we're not dour Presbyterians. But we're, it's a balanced life. It has seasons. It has different shades to it. It has You know, it's even in the cycle of a day, never mind the cycle of a year. It has different colors and flavors to a lived Catholic experience. So it's very important that we indulge ourselves in that, and I mean that in a very positive sense. Um, Even in the fact that you indulge yourself in penance, I suppose. Um, but it is a lived experience. It's not nostalgia. It's a Catholic life, and I've no idea what example they're holding up these days. Um, I think they have basically, to my understanding, I could be very wrong in this. I could be very wrong, but to my understanding, they basically said, well, go with whatever you're feeling, is your lived experience. But that's not the Catholic thing. That's not the because you don't go with your feeling. You go with the church's cycle, and it's wonderful. It's tremendously freeing because you don't have to indulge yourself in um, you know one thing or another, but the church dictates to you in a good sense, where you're going in a cycle of a year, in a cycle of a week, in a cycle of a day, um, for those religious and priests who recite the office. Um, I mean that brings its own cycle to you, and it becomes a way of life, and it's a wonderful life. The Catholic life is a wonderful life. And that can be lived out in many ways as priests and religious and lay people. Um, and it's I, I think Rome has restricted things so much that people don't experience that as such an intense feeling that it can be. Because everyone loves a feeling these days. But that's a feeling they've restricted to the Catholic lay person, fortunately.
Yeah, I think I was trying to find while you were both talking there a quote that I read earlier today, which was brilliant, and I can't find it, but it says exactly what you've been saying, and basically saying that tradition is something that is living, um, something that is a traditionalist or a traditionalism is something that is dead, is something that is past, and something that people, as you say, may have a nostalgia for. Um, but tradition itself, true tradition, is a living thing. Um, and, to sort of to give an example of the kind of difference. I mean, there's a situation at the moment, for example, where for many years there was what I've called enclavism, or enclavism. That is to say, traditionalist communities or societies of priests or religious communities who have um, attempted to live the traditional Catholic charism, um, by reciting the traditional offices, offering the traditional mass, reviving traditional customs, observing traditional customs in their particular communities and praxis. But they've done that in enclaves. They've had to create enclaves where they could do this without interference from the rest of the church. And what we've seen under Pope Francis, and particularly in the last 2 years, and since Traditionis Custodes, is an attack on these enclaves. For example, the Carmelites, Traditionalist Carmelite convent in North America, I forget now where they are, Fairfield Carmelites. Now they were living enclavism, that is to say, they were living a traditional Catholic Carmelite way of life, observing the primitive rule or the reformed primitive rule of the Carmelites as lived by Saint Therese of Avila, etc., and having the traditional liturgy, the traditional recitation of the hours and the Mass, etc. And now they are pointedly being attacked by the Vatican, they've now lost their chaplain. They had to go through Holy Week and Easter without the liturgies, without the sacraments, and they are being basically told, it's either tradition or Rome, contemporary Rome.
No, that really is a deliberate persecution of, of part of, if I hark back to what I was saying before, of a part of Catholic life, which is part of Catholic life are these contemplative orders who spend their lives praying for others. That's a very important part of Catholic life. Saint Therese of Lisieux, who comes from that tradition of Discalced Carmelites, she became patroness of the missions, but she never left the convent cloister. And that way of life, that, as I said earlier, that recitation of the office of centered around then, of course, the highlight of the center of the day being the Holy Mass. Rome wants to take that away from them. I mean, what's going on here? Leave these women alone, for God's sake. Leave these women alone. They're living a holy life in the way they want to live it. It's we're all about a woman's choice, apparently. They choose to live this way, and this is what they want to do. And they want to take that from them. I can't understand. There's a knavish, if I dare say, devilish pernition to this that wants to take it away. It makes me so sad to see it happen. All they want to do is to live out their vocation. And you have these people with an agenda just wants to persecute them for doing nothing more than praying for the world. I mean, this is craziness to the nth degree. If not more than that, as I probably have said too much before. But anyway.
But
Well, you see,
isn't. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Well, I was just going to say, because the question then for these traditional communities is, well, what will you do? Will you defy Rome and continue to live a traditional Catholic vocation and charism and life and or ministry or apostolate? Or what will you do? Will you succumb? Or will you give up? Because those are the three options. One is to carry on in defiance and adhere to tradition. The second is to succumb and to give it all up and just embrace what Rome wants. Or three is to just say, to give it up and sell off the property, dissolve the community, etc.
Well, I think, at least in answer to your question, that it does become that simplistic. And I think that with so many of our friends who are Novus Ordo people, that is where it comes down to, because that's what they'll say. and for themselves as well. They'll say, well, what am I supposed to do? Defy Rome? And Rome will say, we're doing this, you Carmelites, you Franciscans, we're doing this to you for the sake of your salvation, for the sake of your soul, because we're your superior. And see, that's just it, is that we understand that, at least if you understand properly, that we know that even a superior can make a mistake and God will work through that. And that it's important that we recognize that God works through our superiors. However, that's when we get to this point where we have to ask the question, well, when does that become a mark? So we have to say, well, wait. Just like with anything, there's the two things: faith, morals. When it begins to cross those lines, you then have a responsibility for yourself. Okay, now, can it get gray? Yes, it can get very gray, because like Archbishop was saying, you can't even find catechism courses. You can't find priests who know what they're talking about. It's not like you can go get proper counseling, And then if you can find a good priest or religious who might have received the proper education in theology and who maybe lives the proper spiritual life, the chances of them getting back to you are slim, because they're terribly busy, or they're just living their life. All of us know, simply living the life of a cleric keeps you busy. Period. Your days are full, and I don't know who's going to get this, but for me, many mornings you wake up, and for me I say, time to make the donuts, because there's an old commercial in this country, old from the 70s, and it's about this baker. And the commercial was he'd wake up tired. Time to make the donuts. He had to satisfy. And then when he was serving his customers, he was happy, and he was just, and in many ways, that's what it is. I remember, because many people don't know, but I'm by myself right now. I had several men here. And one of the things that were consistent, because they were all Novus Ordo men, okay, that were trying to understand tradition. They could, at some point, it became boring or rote for them. And it was rather quickly. So what do they want? Well, let's change it up. We need excitement. Let's sing. Let's just use this. Let's use it. No. Today is like yesterday. We recite the Psalms and we go, and who knows what God will bring today. It's going to be, okay, most of the days are like that. Okay. The modernity does not like that. Sorry, they don't like it. And so I find that people who are reaching out, who want to understand tradition, they really just want to taste.
Well, this is the problem so much with supposed traditionalist commentators on YouTube, etc. Is always, the titles of their programs and the subject of their discussion. It's always sensationalist. Is the Pope a heretic? Is the Novus Ordo a valid mass? Is blah blah blah. It's all sensationalism. Whereas, as I've been actually sort of teaching our own faithful here the last couple of weeks. In our studies, is that Jesus says many times, and the epistle authors say many times, be alert, be vigilant, be watchful, and it's look out for the little things. Now, of course, one of the things that perhaps comes with time, living traditional religious and priestly life, is that yes, the office. The daily office, the breviary, can become monotonous. We say, it's Thursday, we say the same psalms. It's Friday, we say the same psalms. It's Saturday, we say the same psalms. And if there's a variation because of the sanctoral cycle, so, if it's a saint's day, then, well, it's always the same psalms for a doctor, the same psalms for a confessor, the same psalms for a martyr. And even then, so even that variation can become slightly monotonous or by rote. But that's where, in the religious life and in the priestly spiritual life, that's where our Lord's admonishment to look out for and be diligent over the little things becomes all the more important, because when things do become slightly monotonous or slightly by rote, at the same time, if you still concentrate, you will notice little things. You will notice that even though this is the umpteenth time you've said this psalm, for some reason a verse has come out at you. That despite this is the umpteenth time you've recited this hymn, suddenly some words in there have spoken to you. Or that, it's the umpteenth time of seeing these same words, and yet this thought has come into your head, or something that's going on in your life suddenly resonates with these words. And that's why the discipline is so beneficial, because actually what the monotony as it appears should enable one to do is see and recognize the little things and become aware of them, become cognizant of them, because suddenly you will notice those things that are different, even in a great sea of seeming monotony.
But a lot of, as you mentioned, novelties that have grown into the novice order of church, that they want to enliven the, as they now call it, liturgy of the hours and that sort of stuff. But there's nothing wrong with the mundane. I mean, we all get up in the morning, we all get into the shower, we all drive ourselves to work, we do a day's work, we have lunch at the same time, we find nothing wrong with that. But suddenly, there's something wrong with the liturgy because it's not exciting enough. Come on, it's the whole nature of the breviary, the office, is about a continuous cycle of prayer happening around the world all the time, in all time zones, continuously cycling a prayer at God's command to praise Him at various points throughout the day. And so, I mean, if we put up with it in our lives, as in our daily lives, why should we be barking about the fact that the liturgy of the hours is mundane and boring? And you're quite right to say that sometimes, even though you've read this psalm 1,000 times, there's a voice that speaks to you, that can resonate through your day, that you need to hear. And so, it's, I don't understand the dissonance between our daily lives and our liturgical lives. Why are we complaining, or why does the Novice Order Church complain about it? I should say I'm quite happy with it, but
yeah, absolutely. Some wise words from Anne in Ireland, who says Jesus lived a hidden life for 30 years. Perhaps that was to teach us something.
Yeah, and I've always
by
found
the
that fascinating.
By the way, Anne, next time I'm over, I'd love to meet up with you.
Oh yeah, she's not going to answer you next. I was waiting for her to answer, and I just realized she's not going to answer. Yeah, I was, as I continued to read up, and someone made a fairly good observation. I thought, I mean, it's simplistic, but a lot of the people who are, I don't even know. I know I hesitate, Novus Ordo people who look at tradition and who see something and are asking questions and who want to maybe visit or come to a Latin Mass. And we always say, yes, of course, go. Okay. One of the things I saw was that someone very astute, I thought, said, okay, all your arguments make sense, except you never said or you never gave reasons why the Novus Ordo Mass is invalid. And so I wanted to ask either one of you, since you're both bishops, either one of you, because I have an answer, but I don't know what I'm not a bishop, why is the Novus Ordo Mass invalid?
Well, I'm not sure. I think
I think we talked about this last week, didn't we?
We touched on it last week. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think either myself or Bishop Caeli would say that the Novus Ordo Mass is invalid. I think we would say that it is doubtful in its efficacy for conveying grace, by which, as I said last week, the Mass must be taken as a whole. It's not something that can be divided up, and it's not, which means to say that there is not one part which is more valid or more necessary than another. All of it is necessary because it all provides context.
And Bishop Caeli was right pointing out that came out last week, and that was my point. Is that I'm just, let me inch in here a little bit, because that's their point. Is they're saying, okay, if that's the answer, then why can't I just go back and forth? Because I don't agree with you. I don't agree. I'm not saying I don't. They're going to say, no. I think that the Novus Ordo Mass does have the proper grace for me.
Because the reason why the Novus Ordo Mass is doubtful is because in and of itself, meaning not necessarily in its structure, but in its words, in the way it expresses things, it does not securely manifest Catholic doctrine, Catholic belief, and Catholic teaching, as opposed to the traditional Latin Mass, which does. And if you could, and people have done a whole series of programs explaining the differences, but which is why we would maintain the tradition is more than just about ascetics. Various prayers, various ceremonies and rituals, etc., were stripped from the Mass to create the Novus Ordo Mass, and in so doing took away valuable teaching, spirituality, intentions, devotion, and graces. So that I think Bishop Caeli and I would say, is the Blessed Sacrament confected by the Novus Ordo Missae? Yes. But does the Novus Ordo Missae give as much grace as the traditional Latin Mass? Then the answer would have to be no.
No. And
the answer would have to be no because, and I think, to coin a phrase from an unlikely source, but the Mass as the source and summit of the Christian life, of the Catholic life, that phrase is true of the traditional Latin Mass, because of all the rituals and context and ceremony and words and intentions that go into the traditional Latin Mass. You can definitely say of the traditional Latin Mass, yes, that is expressive and manifest of the source and summit of the Christian life. You cannot say the same of the Novus Ordo Missae, with various critical teaching, and spiritual and intentions taken away from absent from that mass, that form of mass.
I mean, I have to say, as an Irishman, and even in an English context, where we're cousin Catholics, people fought and died for that traditional Latin Mass, and because it was the height and summit of their lives, they needed it. They believed in it, they wanted it, and they would not compromise for it. And you know, you know, I mentioned that in an Irish and a English recusant context, but that goes throughout the world. You know, that goes for the underground church in China, which was sold out by Francis. You know, the Catholic faith has been something. I mean, the Catholic faith is the one and only true faith, and it was given to us by our Lord, and the only real reason, I mean, apart from the sacraments of induction and matrimony, etc., and also extreme unction, but the one that we experience more often, apart from penance or confession, is the sacrament of the Mass. We're compelled to go every Sunday, and that's how we indulge ourselves in our religion, and it is something worth. It's something worth dying for, as has been proven throughout. From the early Christians in the Colosseum up until today. The UN just released figures that the Christian faith is the most persecuted faith throughout the world, mostly in China and in Africa. So it is something that it is worth dying for. It's something that's the very core of our belief, and the traditional Mass is the thing that has sustained us for nigh on 2,000 years. So and I would re-emphasize the fact is that, and I'll leave you with this because I do have to go. But as I said last week, why dabble in doubt? If it's doubtful, if you're confused, if it's doesn't feel good, go to the real deal. And the traditional Latin Mass has been codified for centuries. Is something that you can have no doubt about. You can twist yourself in a pretzel with the Novus Ordo. You can use what do they call it? Eucharistic prayer number 1. You can, whatever it happens to be, to make it as valid as it can be. The words of institution are there. The intention of the priest should be there. Well, if he's using the formula, but even that's not. I mean, we all witnessed. I think, did we highlight this on the show that Father Flager, who had the Easter service, who just made up his Roman canon, and that the words of institution were not as codified. I mean, that's not valid. Not valid at all. But I think if you stick to the missal and have the intent of confecting the Eucharist, that it is a valid thing. But back again, why dabble with doubt? Stick to the tried and tested, because there's no doubt there whatsoever. And back to the Carmelite sisters, it's what has sustained Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Thérèse of Lisieux, Even Benedicta, who was killed in Auschwitz. I mean, this wonderful tradition has the liturgy, and I mean not just the Eucharist, but the entire liturgy, and that's why I'm highlighting the Carmelites. It's because they're devoted to the office. The entire liturgy has sustained the church throughout 2,000 years. And it's incredibly important. And if we let that slip, we're in danger. We are perilously in danger.
Yeah. Yeah. Just before you go, there won't be a show next week because I'm in Armenia and I've no idea whether there'll be data or Wi-Fi or anything else. So
that's where Mother Teresa of Calcutta was from, isn't it? Yeah.
No, she was from Yugoslavia.
I think she's Armenia. I think it's Armenia. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I thought she was from Yugoslavia. Okay.
Well, it's a Google search away.
Yeah. So no show next week. And incidentally, for those who are regular viewers of the channel, there may not be the usual schedule of broadcasts. However, if you go to the oldroman.com, the daily mass and a recording of the daily mass will be available there. But as for the sort of live timed broadcasts, those will probably be minimal while I'm away, because it just depends on whether or not I'll have access internet-wise to be able to set things up. So bear that in mind. Okay.
I'm going to take off. God love you both, and God love all our viewers. And tune in when we can, when we're back on next. And I wish you all the blessings and success of spring and Easter and the summer to come. So, all right, we'll speak to you soon.
Okay, bless you. Right. Goodbye, Bishop Caeli.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
You see, you see what Bishop Caeli was saying there. Read the Carmelites. I mean, that is a good example when we think of the Fairfield Carmelites and the traditional daily routine that they've been living and the daily praxis of the Carmelite vocation and charism, and then compare that. And you can do this on YouTube. Okay, so as Bishop Williamson would say, you don't have to take my word for it. You can research and find out for yourself. You can find on YouTube a traditional Carmelite religious community with an example of their day, and then you can find a more contemporary, relaxed Carmelite community and see the difference. And one of the things I'm sure that will strike you most is the difference in the length of time spent in chapel in prayer, because the traditional Carmelites will spend most of the day effectively in prayer and a good portion of the day in chapel, whereas there is a modern Carmelite community who admit in their video that they have morning prayer together, they have the mass, they have midday prayer and evening prayer, night prayer, and that's it. Otherwise they do their own thing, whereas the traditionalists will have the 8 offices of the breviary in their day, plus time spent in corporate but contemplative prayer and Lectio Divina, the Rosary, etc. And actually, I do say, look on YouTube and look to see what the state of the contemporary church is, because I know some people, of course, only know what they know, meaning, as brother you were saying earlier, their local situation. But actually, if you look on YouTube, and if you look on the World Wide Web, but if you look on YouTube, you can see how the Mass is celebrated in various parts of the world. You can see the difference between the traditional Mass and the modern Mass. You can see the difference in the way traditional seminaries conduct their business and the modern seminaries do. You can see the difference between the religious tradition and those who don't say, oh, it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. The worst of the progressives, and in one sense, that's true, in the sense of the heart, the soul, that is truly 100% committed and dedicated and sincere in its intention to seek and to find God, will find him. But a soul is more likely to achieve God by following traditional spirituality of devotions practice. And this is the huge difference between the old Mass. Is the traditional devotional life is focused entirely on God, whereas the contemporary, more modern praxis is really focused on the individual, is focused on man. The most simplistic, obvious difference is in the traditional Mass, everybody facing east towards the altar and towards the crucifix. In the modern Mass, everybody facing each other. And it's the same in the religious life. The differences in the traditional and contemporary communities is that in the traditional communities, you will find their whole life is orientated toward God, towards seeking God, finding God, knowing God. Whereas the contemporary religious communities will use similar language, but in the praxis are much more about community and much more about a communal experience. So, I mean, brother, you must. Well, I mean, for example, your experience in the Marians, and your attempts there to revive a more traditional character and spirituality and vocation, and the resistance that you had. I mean, what were some of the differences between a traditional Marian spirituality and religious life, and that is the generally the contemporary experience?
Well, I think what most people don't get, which is contemplation. And I don't mean take these 5 steps and then you'll contemplate, because that's what you'll see on the internet a lot. It's not that. It's that a life of prayer, reflection, devotion, of sacraments, you'll begin to contemplate the Creator, the God of everything, and of everything that you're doing, of your life, of your vocation, of your mission, of everything that God is calling us to, God is calling the world to, that God calls the church to. And I think that if I can, maybe, I'm not sure what this is, going back or whatever, but we're talking about traditionalism and I'm thinking of your answers, Bishop Kelly's answers, of course, thinking, well, I don't have a problem with them, but I'm trying to figure out a way to make them fit with what I hear and what I see in the questions from people that come from the Novus Ordo background. Because if I'm hearing that, well, the problem is really about the efficacy, because if you go to Holy Mass every day, even at your local Novus Ordo parish, chances are you're receiving the Blessed Sacrament, you're receiving our Lord, you're growing, all of that. Okay, chances they're going to say to me, so then why go anywhere else? If I'm receiving the Blessed Sacrament, if I'm receiving our Lord, and I'm certain of it, because I'm the one going every day, I realize that you can look from an outsider's perspective and say, well, theologically, because of everything that happened or what they're doing, that can't be sure anymore. And even if you are certain, even if we can say that the proper formula is being used, the proper form, all of that, still because of the way things, I'm still, when I talk, because getting back to maybe what you were saying, because I think that spirituality today is based on emotion. It's not like it's always been that way, or it's never been that way before in the church. But I think that's really what people are looking for. I think you said it earlier, and it may have been Bishop Caeli, but in regards to local, because what does it mean for, what does it mean for a regular Catholic who just wants to get to heaven, wants to get their children to continue to believe, wants their spouse to go to heaven? Okay, what does it mean for them? It means they're just trying to get to Holy Mass on the weekends. They're just trying to maybe make it to a rosary. Maybe they're trying to light a candle or something like that if they can see this. So they're just trying. Okay, so if I'm telling them, well, that's probably enough, because that's all you've got time for, and you're receiving all that you can get from your Novus Ordo parish. So keep going. Because that's what you have, and it is the Blessed Sacrament as far as we can. Maybe that's what we're saying. As far as we know, if you were going to a traditional Latin Mass, you could be certain. Then we will say, well, I hope so, because I don't know, because some of these, because I know, like at Assumption Grotto, I know people will walk in and they'll hear the Latin Mass, and what it is the Novus Ordo being said in Latin, and they'll say, "Oh, that's the TLM," and only someone who goes to the TLM will know. Oh no, that's not the TLM. And at Grotto, they do it very well. And they do it facing east. So you might walk in, and you might think, and see, this is where I'm having some problems.
Well, and this is the same if you walked into St. John Cantius in Chicago, or if you walked into the Brompton Oratory in London, and various other places. You could hear a Latin Mass, and it might look like the traditional Latin Mass, but in fact it's the Novus Ordo. And the key thing, really, the two key things that you mentioned. One is emotion. Now, the faithful here will tell you, one of the things I'm always saying to them is, forget about emotions. Forget about emotions. You cannot rely on emotions. You cannot, emotions are irregular. They come and go. They're unreliable. While our faith is not an emotional response. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a place for emotion. Of course there is. That's not to say that subjectively we may indeed respond and react to things emotionally, but our faith shouldn't be grounded in our emotions. Our faith should be grounded in reason, should be grounded in hope, should be grounded in trust in the promises of Christ. There's no room for there's a place for emotion, but our faith shouldn't be based on emotion, because that is a shifting sand. And as the parable says, the man who built his house upon the sand, it all fell down. And so often that is the case with the experience of so many Christians today, that when something goes wrong in their life, when a major tragedy happens, or they become ill, or whatever, then they curse God and say, oh, well, there's nothing to this, blah, blah, blah. And again, it's their emotions. They're reacting and responding and going off their emotions. So you're absolutely right to point, that out. That is, I would say, a big difference between the traditional Catholic approach, devotional and spiritual life, compared with the contemporary, which tends to be about emotions. And that's why, the young men you spoke of before always wanting something new, always wanting something fresh, always wanting, because they're emoting and they're reacting. They want an emotional response. And tradition can sometimes be quite dry, to be brutally honest, to be brutally frank. It can sometimes be quite dry, but but we continue and we persist because it's not about emotions. And then the other key thing you said was, when people say, oh, well, I haven't got time. I've only got time to do this. I've only got time to go to mass at the weekend. I've only got time to do, a 5-minute rosary once a week, whatever. Well, here again is this fundamental difference in approach between the traditional and the contemporary. And again, the contemporary is all anthropocentric and egocentric. Again, read the emotions. It's all about how I feel. It's about what I think, what I feel, and if I don't feel anything from this, or if I feel negatively about this, or if I think differently, then that invalidates this, or I don't want to get involved with that, or whatever. Likewise, the approach, the traditional Catholic and Christian understanding of our lives is that the first and primary duty of our lives is to love God. That's hence Jesus and the summary of the law, the 2 great commandments. The first is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And what that means is that really we really should be spending our lives continually praising and worshiping God. In fact, we should be face down on the ground, recognizing our unworthiness, and yet still striving with our every breath and being to praise him, worship him, adore him, and honor him. Now, obviously, God doesn't want us quite to do things in that way, because he has given us other things in life to worry about, like food, like shelter, like clothing, etc. So clearly, we have to get on with the duties of life. We have to get on with our responsibilities. We have to go to work. We have to look after others. We have to do this, that, and everything else. But we can still strive to love God with our whole heart, soul, mind, and strength whilst doing those things, which is why our Lord says the second commandment is like it, to love your neighbor as you would love yourself. And elsewhere in St. John, of course, he says how we do that. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Meaning to the point of the cross, meaning to live self-sacrificially for God and for the other. And in loving the other, just as we would want to be recognized ourselves as a child of God, as a person whom God has called from eternity into existence, who is calling to eternity with him. That's how we should understand ourselves properly as children of God, and that's how we should understand others properly as children of God, either as brothers and sisters in Christ by virtue of baptism, or as potential brothers and sisters in Christ, to whom we should be manifesting the gospel, proclaiming the gospel, encouraging them to embrace the salvation and the cross that Jesus offers, that they may become, like us, with him, one in God and God with us. So if then the first point, if the point of our lives primarily is to love and to worship, to serve and to honor and adore God, that means everything else in life should be orientated toward that same purpose, so that to love the Lord our God with our whole heart and our whole mind means to keep him foremost in our minds at all times. And we can do that by intentionally by whatever action we're doing, intending to remember God and to honor God by it, essentially by striving to do our best at whatever that task is in order to glorify him, so that our whole lives may be an act of sacrificial love toward him, so that he is always in our thoughts and in our minds and in our hearts. And that means reprioritizing our lives in order to accomplish that. Now, the religious life is, of course, a life that is supposed to be completely orientated in that way toward loving God. So everything that everything that goes on in a religious community, especially in traditional religious community, is geared toward manifesting love and devotion to and for God. So that obviously when we're in chapel, we're worshipping and praising him. But even when we're going about menial tasks in the traditional Catholic spirituality, we're encouraged to recite litanies, to pray the Rosary, to perform mental prayer. And before every task, we should be intending, before we do it, to glorify God and to honor him and worship him through that action, so that our whole being, body, mind, and spirit, is perpetually involved in fulfilling the first commandment. And when we interact with others through the second commandment, realizing the second commandment, we manifest the first. And the same, though, should be true for all other Christians. So those who aren't living the religious life, but nonetheless are striving to live a Christian life. See, the only difference between religious life and everybody else's lives is that the religious life has created a specific environment and community in order to facilitate a whole primary orientation toward God. But actually, the rest of us living outside a community should be striving to do similar, despite the differences in the circumstances and situations of our environment and existence. So there is no excuse for any Christian to say that they cannot, upon first waking in the morning, as Bishop Caeli referred to earlier, make an act of offering and thanksgiving toward God. When you open your eyes before, and as you get out of bed, get on your knees and remember God and speak to him. Thank him for giving him another day, another opportunity to love and to serve and to worship him. And you can do that before going to the toilet, before brushing your teeth, before jumping into the shower, before sorting out your breakfast, etc. God should come first. So you put him first. And the point is here, we do have a certain autonomy about the way in which we live our lives and the way in which we orientate our lives. It's not an excuse to say, oh, well, I have to get up and immediately I have to go and do this or do that. No, then the first thing you should do is get up and pray, get up and worship God, then go about your business. And in fact, if some people say, well, what should I pray? Well, you can pray thanksgiving for the fact that God has given you another day on this earth to serve him. You can think about the day ahead and offer it to God and say to him, because there may be an important thing going on, or you may be anxious about something or whatever. Share those things with God. Include him in your day. Say to him, I hope and pray that you will be with me when. And then continually throughout the day, include him, involve him. A traditional Catholic will try and recite the Angelus 3 times daily, or the Regina Caeli, as it is in Eastertide. Say those prayers. They take 2 minutes, if that, minute and a half. If you're on your own and you have to say them quickly. But the point is, and you can set an alarm on your mobile to do that. Everyone's got a mobile these days. Everyone knows, you can set alarms for it. You can set an alarm to wake up in the morning. You can set a timer for when you're boiling an egg. You can speak to Alexa, for goodness sake, and ask Alexa to remind you when it's 12 o'clock for the Angelus, or 6 o'clock for the Angelus. You just have to take responsibility, take control and reorientate and reprioritize your daily life and your daily living. And if that means having to say to someone, rarely but occasionally, oh, I can't do that then because it's my regular prayer time, or I can't do that then because I will be reciting the Angelus, or I can't do that then because I'm going to hear Mass, it's a holy day of obligation, then so be it. Then tell them. You should tell them everything else that's going on in your life. When, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that, you always give an excuse. Well, why don't you tell the truth? What could be a, you know, a better, so, you know, when Muslim friends and colleagues here during Ramadan or on a Friday, when we're trying to arrange a meeting or whatever, they're not shy in saying, oh, well, I can't because it'll be prayer time, it'll be Friday and I'll be at prayers at the mosque, or I won't meet you for a drink because it's Ramadan and I'm fasting, or whatever. You know, they're not ashamed to say these things. Why should we be? And as traditional Catholics, we have various things that we can be doing and should be doing that we can give as valid excuses to say, this is going on in my life right now. This is, you know, I'm religious, I have faith, and so no, I can't go there, or I can't do this, or etc. The trouble is, in the West particularly, people have capitulated to this secularist way of thinking, that, you know, religion should be confined to one's private life. And the irony of that is, of course, is that people these days have no shame in talking, sharing all sorts of things about their private life, you know, things that previously you wouldn't dream, you know, people wouldn't have dreamed of talking about openly to a colleague at work, or to somebody in the shop, or with friends in a pub about their private life. You just wouldn't. Today, people have no problem at all. You listen to young people. I mean, you know, one has to overhear them on the bus and things sometimes, and it is incredible what they share with each other about their private lives. But isn't it ironic that people are more than happy to talk about that which really, most of the time, is sinful and does not honor God? They're quite happy to talk about that, but they're not happy to talk about that which honors God. They're not happy to say, well, I can't go to this because I'm going to church, or I can't do this because I have to go say my prayers, or I can't do this because, etc. And the point is here is that, you know, a traditional Catholic life, with all its traditions and customs and rituals, etc., provides the Christian with a structure that will enable them, that facilitates them to live their life prioritizing God. Whereas the contemporary praxis of, oh, well, it's all relative, and, you know, this is optional, you know, do it if you want, or don't worry if you can't, etc., does not facilitate, enable, nor encourage a Catholic to live a truly Christian life. Really, in a nutshell, I would say that is the difference. So on the one hand, yeah, we could say to someone, oh, well, you know, well, you go to Mass once a week, okay, that's the bare minimum required, good for you. Or we can say, well, actually, you know, that's not living your life in love with God, with your whole heart and mind and soul and strength, is it really? And yet that is not only Catholic teaching, but Jesus's teaching. It's actually in Scripture. That's what is required of a Christian, that they should be living their whole life, every day of their life, primarily focused on God. And with that, I'm afraid I'm going to have to call things to an end, because I have another appointment myself. So, 'cause, 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 ' Reminder, of course, there's no program next week. Check the website for what is going to be available, because whatever is going to be available will be made available there. And if you have any questions, of course, this is provoked or prompted any questions, then do feel free to contact us via the website, and we will get back to you, or indeed address those questions in the next episode, which will be in 2 weeks' time. Brother Stanislas, any last final thoughts?
No, I agree with everything you say. I was just thinking that I hope no one gets the idea that traditionalists are not emotive. That doesn't mean that we can't. I tend to be a little bit of a stoic. I can appear that way, but that doesn't mean that we don't laugh, that we don't have a good time, that we don't see movies, that we don't listen to music, that we don't try to enjoy those things that which God has provided the world with. We certainly don't indulge, or we try not to, I would hope. But I would hope that people hearing this recognize that it's important to be a part of the world, to be a part of people's lives, to be a part of what's going on, but to make good choices. And I think that's probably all in what you're saying, what you said.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Well, I'll conclude things then with a blessing. Dominus vobiscum, et cum spiritu tuo. Sit nomen Domini benedictum, ex hoc nunc et usque in saecula, adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini, qui feci caelum et terram. Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendet super vos et mane et semper. Amen. God bless you all. Thank you for watching, and we will see you very soon. As always, if you have appreciated this program, then please share it, like it, use the emoji and even emote about it. And if you and please support us, visit theoldroman.com or see the show notes for ways in which you can support us financially. And keep the show on the road. There are costs involved, and we don't meet them all. So please, of your charity, if you can help us that way, then please do. Otherwise, until next time, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from him. God bless.
Thank you, Excellency.